Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible journeys in history. It's a story of courage, desperation, and a voyage that literally redrew the map of the world. This is the story of Vasco da Gama and his quest for a sea route to India. It sounds totally crazy, right? But believe it or not, 500 years ago, it was a fact. Spices like pepper and cinnamon were unbelievably valuable in Europe. I mean, they were used for everything, from keeping food from going bad to making medicine. The problem was, the only way to get them was this long, dangerous, and super expensive land journey, and Portugal wanted to find a shortcut. And this is where our story really kicks off. The race to find this new route started a whole new age of exploration, and everything, absolutely everything, was riding on the success of this one single mission. So the guy with the big plan was Portugal's King Manuel I. He picked a captain who had a reputation for being tough, stern, and incredibly brave, Vasco da Gama. The mission was simple, but it was also almost impossible. Find a sea route all the way around Africa to India. If he could pull it off, Portugal would control the entire spice trade and become a world superpower. So in July of 1497, they set sail. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just a trip to a new country. They were basically sailing off the edge of the known world, into waters that no European had ever properly mapped before. Da Gama was in charge of a tiny fleet of just 4 ships. His flagship was the Sao Gabriel, and all of them were built to be extra tough, designed to handle the crazy storms of the open ocean. Oh, and they were also armed to the teeth with heavy cannons, just in case. On board these ships were about 170 men. It was a real mix of people. You had your experienced sailors, soldiers, and even some prisoners who were brought along to do the most dangerous jobs. Life on the ship was just brutal. Imagine sleeping on a hard wooden deck for months, living on nothing but dried meat and hard biscuits. Now, instead of playing it safe and hugging the African coast, Da Gama made an incredibly bold move. He steered his ships way out into the middle of the Atlantic, hoping to catch stronger winds. It was a massive gamble that meant for 90 straight days, that's 3 months, they saw nothing but ocean. They were navigating with just the stars and basic tools. One tiny mistake and they would have been lost forever. So they survived the open ocean, and they managed to get around the treacherous southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. But just as they reached the Indian Ocean, a new enemy appeared. This one was invisible, and it started attacking the crew from the inside out. That enemy was a disease called scurvy. See, after months at sea without any fresh fruit or vegetables, the sailors' bodies just started to fall apart. Back then, nobody knew it was caused by a simple lack of vitamin C, so it felt like some mysterious plague. Men got too weak to even stand up, their gums would swell up, and their teeth would literally fall out. It was a horrific way to die, and many did. As they sailed up the East African coast, they ran into some trouble in ports like Mombasa. But then, in a place called Malindi, their luck finally changed. The ruler there was friendly, and more importantly, he gave them an expert navigator, someone who actually understood the powerful monsoon winds and knew the secret to crossing the vast Indian Ocean. With their new guide, the trip across the ocean was shockingly fast. On May 20th, 1498, after just 23 days, they finally saw it, the coast of India. They had made it to Calicut, the heart of the spice trade. They were the very first Europeans to ever reach India by sea. But this is where the mission just slams into a wall. Da Gama tried to set up a trade deal with the local ruler, who was called the Zamorin. The thing is, Calicut was a rich, sophisticated city, and the gifts Da Gama brought, some plain cloth and cheap trinkets, were seen as cheap and, frankly, insulting. To make matters worse, rival Arab merchants who already had a good thing going there whispered to the Zamorin that these newcomers were probably just pirates. And with that, the negotiations completely fell apart. So, frustrated and basically empty-handed, Da Gama decided it was time to head home. But if the crew thought the worst was behind them, they were tragically wrong. The journey back to Portugal was going to be far more brutal and far more deadly than the entire trip out. And this right here shows you the huge mistake they made. They ignored the local advice and tried to cross the Indian Ocean at the absolute worst time of year, sailing straight into the powerful monsoon winds. So a trip that took just 23 days on the way to India now took an agonizing 132 days on the way back. They were trapped at sea. Scurvy came back, and this time it was even worse. The crew was just devastated. So many men died from disease and starvation that there weren't even enough healthy sailors left to handle all the ships. They had no choice but to abandon one of their vessels, the Sao Rafael, and set it on fire right there in the middle of the ocean. Finally, in September 1499, after 2 incredibly long years, the battered survivors limped back into Lisbon harbor. They'd lost 2 ships, more than half their men were dead. But they had done it. They had found the sea route to India, and Portugal treated them like national heroes. This timeline really gives you a sense of the epic scale of this 2-year journey. They leave Lisbon in July 1497, they're around the Cape of Good Hope by November, they arrive in India in May 1498, and then, after that horrifying trip home, they finally get back in September 1499. What a journey. And this single voyage changed the course of history. For Portugal, it was the start of a massive and powerful trading empire. For everyone else in Europe, it meant spices that were once luxury items became way more common. But it also kicked off the era of European colonial control of the seas, which led to centuries of violent conflict and the downfall of many kingdoms in the East. And that's really the complicated legacy of this whole thing. There's no doubt that this voyage connected East and West like never before, starting a whole new era of global interaction. But it also unleashed centuries of conquest and competition. So it leaves us with a big question. What is the real price of discovery?